Right? Line up for a doctor in Brockton goes around the block. They have a spot for 500 people, and that many people went to line up to make sure that they get in. Pretty crazy stuff. I'll show you that video. Just like Justin, it reminds me of Just Not Ready. Do you remember the Stephen Harper line against Justin Trudeau that Justin's not ready, and he's not smart enough for this job. He's not prepared. He's only ever been a snowboard instructor and a prop fall artist or whatever. Right? Like he hasn't done anything that would qualify him to actually run the country. And Stephen Harper was right, but it didn't hit with people, and then they kept doing it. So I'll show you Just Like Justin is the new Axe the Tax, but it doesn't satisfy any of the problems of Axe the Tax. It's a slogan. It's an empty slogan, right? It's a cardboard cutout. There you go. Jagmeet Singh is going to support the new Liberal leader to prevent Polyev from getting into power. Yep, 100%. So I hope that the Conservatives have a counter, because up till now, they've been able to prorogue, or they've been able, not prorogue, they've been able to filibuster and prevent the government from getting C-63 through. But other than that, they haven't been effective at anything else. So it's unfortunate. But yeah, I 100% am thinking that the way things are stacking up now, that we may not get an election. I was skeptical that we were going to get an election anyway, but we may not get an election. Carney is probably going to be crowned as the Liberal leader, then inserted as prime minister, and then we'll go to an election in late fall after they've been able to campaign with Carney across the country for the whole summer. And they're going to try and sanitize him. They're going to, floating the idea of removing the carbon tax. They're going to try and bring a budget back to being somewhat centered. They're going to try and onboard Liberals who've been disaffected by Justin Trudeau and his circus, right? They're going to try and maintain power. And the linchpin in all of it is Jagmeet Singh's support. Carney's going to promise Jagmeet Singh a cabinet position. He's going to promise some other big NDP names cabinet positions. They're going to try and do this, honestly, 100%. And we may be screwed unless Polyev has got some kind of counter. And I don't think that he does. It doesn't seem like he's got much of a counter, but that's where we're going to. And so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to start with Darth Powell. And I just think, I didn't move this over. I just think that he's got a point here. He says, let's review. The government is stealing your money with inflation. Yep. They're lowering your wages with immigration. They're increasing your expenses with 20 years of lower interest rates. And you think the Taliban is our biggest enemy. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, but a lot of people would say, if you gave them a list of 5 or 6 enemies they could choose from, they'd probably list Taliban before our own government. And I think they'd be wrong. Today's show is a little messy. I feel like it's a little messy because we've got Freeland to talk about in her own right, and Carney to talk about in his own right, the election to talk about in its own right. We've got the tariffs to talk about, and they all kind of cross over. There's a little bit of crossover for everything, so it feels a little bit messy to me. So I did my best with separating it out in a way that makes sense to me. So I hope this makes sense to you. So it's a journey we're going on, right? And the journey is all the crazy stuff that happened yesterday. And I just try and make it make sense in my head. So anyway, I feel like it's a bit messy, but I hope it hits right. Leadership first. True North is reporting Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will convene a cabinet retreat in Quebec on the day of Donald Trump's inauguration as President of the United States. So this seems like 4 days from now, when the tariffs are set to be taking place, they're not really going to be working, right? Prorogation, cabinet retreats, let's have a party, right? I don't know, guys. I am not confident in Canada's ability to respond appropriately to what's going on. True North is talking about this. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he won't seek re-election as an MP in the next federal election after holding the Quebec riding of Papineau for over 16 years. And so this is a question talking about his thoughts for the future, what he's going to do. Here we go.
Trudeau, do you plan on running in the next election? And if you don't, what are you going to do when you're not Prime Minister anymore?
First of all, I want to thank Scott for that answer. It's rare I get such support. No, I do have to say that particularly those who've been around. Oh, sorry, I'm endangering your political fortunes by thanking you publicly. I do want to say that Scott and Doug and a number of the folks who've been around a while have been extraordinarily invaluable in these conversations, in this Team Canada approach. There's always a lot of politics going on around this country, but to know when to step up in the Canadian national interest, and to know that that's what Canadians want to see is really is to the credit of everyone around this table. In terms of my own decisions, I will not be running in the upcoming election. As to what I might be doing later, I honestly haven't had much time to think about that at all. I am entirely focused on doing the job that Canadians elected me to do in an extraordinarily pivotal time right now. The U.S. inauguration and the weeks that follow are something that is of deep, deep importance to Canadians, and we are entirely focused on that as a team.
Having a lame duck prime minister negotiate with an incoming Donald Trump regime that hates him is not what Canadians want at all whatsoever. Not even a little tiny bit. Here is JJ McCullough, and he says, you can read between the lines in this letter and already see Jagmeet Singh is starting to quietly build up a permission structure that will allow him to go back to propping up the Liberals in Parliament. Jagmeet Singh says Trump's tariffs threats will cost jobs and will drive up prices, so Kevin O'Leary, who only speaks for himself, is negotiating to get rid of the Canadian passport. So this is Jagmeet Singh, and I'll read the letter in a little bit. Hold on. Yeah, I'll read it during the tariff chunk of tabs here, but I just wanted to highlight that after reading it, the takeaway from JJ McCullough is that this looks like he's publicly floating like, oh yeah, this is too dangerous to allow Poilievre to get in, and we've got to make sure that we've got a Team Canada approach and everybody's on board. I feel like Jagmeet Singh, when given the opportunity, will enthusiastically support Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland, whichever one is the Liberal leader, and he will say, this has solved all of the problems, and this is obviously the right move. We have to support the current government in whatever madcap thing that they're going to do next. So I don't have any faith that Jagmeet Singh is going to be the person to start fixing this. I think we're in for a whole world of hurt because these people are in charge of the response at this point in time. That's awful. That's awful. YEG Wave says Alberta has refused to sign a joint statement with the other premiers and the Prime Minister on responding to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's potential tariffs. So this is all the tariff chunk now. Premier Smith rejected export tariffs on Alberta's energy and products and opposed cutting off energy supplies to the United States. She emphasized that Alberta won't accept federal policies that hurt its economy and called for a national strategy to reduce Canada's reliance on the U.S. as a primary customer. So and there's in a minute, I'll show you video of Danielle Smith talking about making pipelines and things like that. But if we wanted to diversify 4 days before Donald Trump takes over the United States, it's the wrong time to start talking about it. If you wanted to diversify and protect yourself from the United States, from dealing with the United States, then Energy East, Northern Gateway projects, all of these pipelines, domestic pipelines, should have been enthusiastically built quickly. Like building a pipeline in 5 days is probably not doable, right? Starting a pipeline in 5 days in Canada isn't even doable. If they said, listen, we need to get this done ASAP, I want it done by March, let's go, shovels in the ground today. That's not possible. It'd be 5 weeks before they even convene the committee to talk about thinking about it, right? Like, we have to have 2 meetings to talk about thinking about it, and then we'll think about it for a while, and then we'll have 2 more meetings to talk about what we thought about. It's crazy. And I mean, it's not credible. They don't want to fix the problem. They just want to stymie Alberta's ability to send product to market, and that's not good. Nicole in Alberta says, as Ford put it, united we stand, divided we fall. Let Canada fall. Let Ontario absorb the impact with the auto sector. Right? Like, that's not so good. Leave Alberta alone. That so many Albertans think this sort of attack from our country is normal, is atrocious. Alberta needs out. So I don't agree with let's sacrifice Ontario for Alberta. I don't agree with that whatsoever. But at the same time, I think we're all in a bad way. And I think Trump is going to I don't think he wants to cause harm to Canadians. I think he wants to turn us into Americans. So he's going to use his leverage to try and turn us into Americans, whichever way he can do that. And so it's one of those situations where he doesn't want to cause harm, but the Liberals are saying he's going to cause all this harm. And he's saying, listen, I just don't want to subsidize a foreign country to the tune of $200 billion. But I can do that to a state. So you become a state, I'll keep doing that. Everything runs as usual. We normalize monetarily. Everything's happy. And I get known as the president who bought Canada. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he wants to hurt anybody, and I don't think he wants to hurt Americans or Canadians, but I think that he views all of this as a win-win-win-win-win. You know what I mean? Canada can suffer for a little while. He can onboard American jobs back to Detroit or wherever, and then he can onboard Canada after we've suffered enough and we don't want to suffer anymore. Right? I don't know. I don't think that he wants to actually do any harm, and I think that our response is stupid. I think that what we're proposing to do with retaliatory tariffs and all the rest of it is stupid. We should talk to Donald Trump and we should say, hey, we're going to close our borders. We're going to stop importing a bunch of people who then go down to the United States. We've stopped this. We've stopped the foreign students. We've stopped the foreign workers. We've turned down our immigration. Like, is that good enough? Like, we really don't want these tariffs. What now? What do you want from us? But we're not doing any of that. We're doing a whole bunch of bullshit that doesn't actually get the problem solved. It's like you want to start a business, so you start designing the logo, right? Like, oh man, you're missing it. You are missing it. And so we're designing the logo right now. And it's like, man, we're not doing what we should be doing. We're window dressing when we should actually be packing, getting ready to move. You know what I mean? Like, So City News says Alberta won't support the Fed's plan to deal with Trump tariffs. Smith says, this is just a quick kind of overview. Alberta is refusing to sign on to a joint statement from all other premiers and the Prime Minister on the plan to respond to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's potential tariffs on Canadian goods. The decision from Premier Danielle Smith comes after a First Minister's meeting in Ottawa on Wednesday that was aimed at showing a united front in response to the tariff threats. As the premiers and Justin Trudeau held their closing news conference, a joint statement was released, vowing a collaborative approach to any tariffs and promising support for businesses and regions that could be hit hard. Promising supports is giving people money. It is inflationary when you print money and hand it to people. Here, we see that Donald Trump's tariffs are hurting you. Here's money, right? And like, that sounds like it's very supportive and stuff, but it's not. It's just inflationary. It's going to bankrupt us even further. It's going to make things worse in different ways, right? And it's not like it's like in chess. Sometimes when you're pinned and you have to lose a piece, there's no good choice. Sometimes you get screwed. And I mean, our government has played a bad chess game and they put us in a position where we're pinned and now there's no good move, right? It's not like, well, they could do this and that would be better. I think that there's no good move. They're screwed either way, right? And so it's one of those things where if they give money to businesses, they're going to cause inflation and they know it. But if they don't give money to businesses, maybe the businesses collapse, right? So like, it's both ways bad, but probably the business is not collapsing is less bad, right? Like, an argument could be made, but then on the other side, you could say, well, you got to let that deadwood let the fire burn through and let that deadwood go. But if it's artificially created through this tariff battle and stuff, you want to minimize as much damage as possible, but create more damage by creating inflationary positions, right? Like, it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating. But I fully admit that, again, there's no good move here because they've screwed the game so badly to this point. Okay. And it's their fault. And they're saying, listen, we're not going to leave the leadership position because we've got to deal with this. And they've done a terrible freaking job up to this point. They've run the game so badly that we're losing and we're going to lose a big piece now. And there's nothing we can do about it. Right? Nothing we can do. So moving on just a little bit, let's listen to, here's the communique. Mackenzie Gray says Alberta did not sign the joint communique at the end of the meeting with the premiers and the Prime Minister. Danielle Smith is the only premier who didn't come to the closing press conference. Here's what the other premiers and the Prime Minister agreed on. Good for her. It's hard to stand up and say the rest of you are wrong and I'm not going to do any of this and you're sacrificing Alberta on the altar to save everybody else and I'm not going to participate in that either. Good for her. Like, it's hard. It's hard. And so like, there's some days that I'm like, man, Danielle Smith's doing a good job. And other days I'm like, what's your game, Danielle Smith? This communique is medium long. And there's 2 full pages. I'll read it. First Minister's statement on the Canadian-United States relationship, January 15th. Canada and the United States have the closest and most successful partnership in the world. At their meeting today, Canada's First Ministers reiterated that the two countries are stronger, more prosperous, and safer when they work together. First Ministers discussed ways to protect Canadian families, workers, and employers from the consequences of possible U.S. tariffs, which would cause economic harm to Canadians and Americans alike. Trade and investment between Canada and the U.S. supports millions of jobs on both sides of the border and helps ensure the secure flow of goods and people between the countries. They will continue to work together, standing up for Canadians remains in the face of unjustified and unreasonable U.S. tariffs. Collaborative efforts will continue to try to prevent the U.S. tariffs, including actions taken by the federal government to strengthen border security and curb the flow of illicit drugs such as fentanyl into Canada and American communities. The federal plan, announced in December, invests in cutting-edge technology, empowering law enforcement, and ensuring that only those eligible to remain in Canada do so. For First Ministers agree that the federal government, in collaboration with all other governments, local police and authorities, will continue to bolster security at the border and strengthen the immigration system. The plan must also include measures to tighten the visa issuances policy to prevent arrivals to Canada under false pretenses. Law enforcement across the country will work together to further build trust and confidence among U.S. decision makers, and Canada takes its borders responsibilities seriously and is taking action. First Ministers agree that enhanced security must be undertaken by authorities on both sides of the U.S. border, Canada-U.S. border, to stop the flow of illegal firearms. First Ministers agree to continue united advocacy efforts with key U.S. administration, congressional, and business leaders to emphasize the negative impacts of U.S. tariffs on American national interests and the U.S. economy. Cooperation with Canada offers significant complementary benefits to U.S. priorities. While they are making every effort to prevent U.S. tariffs, First Ministers are committed to continuing to work together on a full range of measures to ensure a robust response to possible U.S. tariffs, including supports for sectors, business, and individuals. If the federal government implements retaliatory measures, it will ensure rapid availability of substantial resources that effectively mitigate economic impacts to workers and businesses. This includes, but is not limited to, the distribution of revenue from potential retaliatory tariffs as quickly as possible. They agreed to take a collaborative approach to U.S. engagement that recognizes the unique economic needs of all provinces and territories. First Ministers acknowledge that the importance of increasing defense spending, and meeting the NATO 2% target as quickly as possible, recognizing its critical connection to strategic infrastructure and Canada's economic and security partnership with the U.S. and other allies. They further agreed that collective action must be taken to safeguard Arctic security and sovereignty. First Ministers agreed to advance development of high economic impact products, including transportation and infrastructure projects, working in partnership with Indigenous people towards economic reconciliation. These projects support Canada's economic growth and allow Canada to provide the U.S. with more of the energy, critical minerals, and other goods and services that it needs to fuel shared economic growth. First Ministers will continue working closely together on Canada-U.S. relations and agreed to meet weekly following President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration on January 20th, 2025. First Ministers agree that Canada is a proud and sovereign nation committed to upholding its values and responsibilities on the global stage. As a strong, independent country, we make decisions that reflect the best interests of our citizens while actively contributing to global peace and stability. We stand firm in our resolve to protect our borders, support our communities, and collaborate with international partners to address common challenges. The government of Alberta did not approve this joint statement between the government of Canada and the Council of the Federation. So, yeah, interesting stuff there. Here's Justin Trudeau talking about this. Trudeau reiterates that cutting off Alberta energy exports to the United States is a possibility and says the country's premiers should stand united behind Canada. I don't think it's a possibility. I don't know what mechanisms other than taxation Trudeau could levy against, like an export tax, Trudeau could do against Alberta or on behalf of Alberta against the United States. Anyway, here's Trudeau talking about it.
We had an excellent conversation today from around the table with passionate Canadians who are proud to represent very different regions of the country, but who are all united on one thing, which is we will stand up for Canada. We will protect Canadians. We will make sure that we are there to show what this country is made of. At the same time, we've also agreed that no one region of the country should disproportionately bear the burden of standing up for all other Canadians. We have made it very clear that everything is on the table as potential responses, but we've also been very, very clear that it has to be fair across the country. If the American administration moves forward with its plans on tariffs, it will first and foremost hurt American citizens and American consumers, but it'll also hurt Canadians. And Canadians need to stand together to make sure we're there for each other, particularly those who may be carrying a heavier load than others because of what the American administration might do.
Right. Let's redistribute everybody's wealth because of those mean Americans. Here's Danielle Smith saying that it's unconscionable that they're even considering it. I've played this before, but she's saying we're not going to stop the energy going from Alberta to the United States. It's not going to happen.
You'd hinted a little bit earlier that if there is some sort of export ban on Alberta oil, that would precipitate a national unity crisis. From your perspective as Premier of Alberta, what does that look like other than, I don't know, people being mad in the streets? Or is it a separation referendum? Like, what are we talking about when you say national unity crisis?
Well, I can't predict what Albertans would do, but as you know, the part of my strategy over the last 2 years has been to say that we can have a constructive relationship with Canada, and I would hope that would continue to be the case. Here's the thing I find irritating about Eastern politicians making that argument. The reason I find it irritating is because we could have had Energy East, which would have expanded our ability to support our friends in Eastern Canada and also been an export market off the East Coast. We could have had Northern Gateway, which would have expanded and supported export markets in a more substantial way off the West Coast. And Eastern politicians advocated against those things. And so we went to work on expanding our access to the United States with additional egress, with twinning, with looping. We did that because the rest of the country wasn't interested in having that conversation. So to now make the argument that that's a point of leverage is going to be very, very irritating, not only to me, but also to my fellow Albertans. If they want to start the conversation by saying, gosh, maybe we should have had Energy East and Northern Gateway. Let's restart that so that we're not so dependent on one customer. I am more than happy to have that conversation, and I hope that's where the conversation goes. But having been so hostile to Alberta's interests and having canceled so many important projects that would have allowed us to have a diversified customer base, it's outrageous to me that they would even propose it.
Right? Outrageous. It's outrageous. And it is outrageous. It's absolutely insane. Here's a senior council border Honorable Sonia Savage says, I fully support Danielle Smith protecting our oil and gas from unilateral Ottawa export ban on energy. Some say we need Team Canada. That may have had more appeal if there had been a Team Canada to help us get our resources to market in the past, but that support wasn't there. Yeah, so like it's Rich. It's Rich saying we've got to be Team Canada. My question is, you mean the Chinese people who are running our government currently? That Team Canada, those guys, that's who you want us to be loyal to? The Team Canada who calls anybody who disagrees with them alt-right? The Team Canada who calls the Emergencies Act on the truckers? That's who you want us to support right now? Get bent. Like, honestly, I have no interest. Absolutely none. I hope you lose bigly, honestly. And I mean, that means Canada loses, but we have screwed it's like watching a hockey game and your team's that you're wearing the team colors. You've got, the red and white Canada. We're at the Olympics and we're down 11-0, 11-1 maybe for a pity goal. Maybe they scored an own goal and you're like, okay, well, at least we've got one. Don't mention who scored the goal, right? Like we are the game is lost at this point in time. And these people are pretending like it's the second period and they're going to come and rally. Bullshit. We've got a minute left in the third and we lost. And we let these people play for us. We lost. Steven says, do you support Premier Danielle Smith? Smith would say she's standing up for Albertans. This is 54 seconds talking about this stuff. Fassi Kapolis is interviewing Danielle Smith. Here we go.
Now, well, the premiers you just heard from and the prime minister are largely singing from the same psalm book. There is one premier who attended virtually, Danielle Smith from Alberta, who did not, or was not rather, a part of the press conference there that you heard with the clips we just played. I'm going to read to you what she posted on social media. Her view of the meeting was a bit different than what you just heard. She said, I had a constructive discussion with my fellow premiers. She went on to say, we agreed on several strategies and I look forward to continuing to work with them on this critical issue. However, she writes, federal government officials continue to publicly and privately float the idea of cutting off energy supply to the U.S. and imposing export tariffs on Alberta energy. Until these threats cease, Alberta will not be able to fully support the federal government's plan in dealing with the threatened tariffs. I have with me live now Canada's ambassador to the U.S., Kirsten Hellman.
Sorry, I thought she was interviewing Danielle Smith. Oh well. Here is Doug Ford talking about this. I try and line up the premiers, right, and how they're responding. True North says Prime Minister Trudeau says country comes first. Ha ha ha. Like that's rich coming from him, right? China? You mean? Do you mean China? Is that who you're talking about, Doug Ford? Justin Trudeau? We'll listen to about a minute of this. There's 3.5 minutes, but we're not going to listen that much. Here we go.
I understand Danielle Smith has posted online her sort of reaction to this and why she didn't sign the communique, saying she can't support what's going on today because the idea is still being floated about putting an export tariff on our oil and gas. So what's your reaction to that? Why were you unable to bring her on board with this?
Well, that's what's unique about our group. Everyone has their interest at heart, and I respect Premier Smith. I respect that she's concerned about protecting her energy, and that's her choice. That is her choice. But I have a little different theory. I have a different theory that protect your jurisdiction, but country comes first. Canada's a priority. And I don't believe in jeopardizing one sector or another. Premier Smith's oil is Ontario's auto sector. Right. So again, we all have different views, and we can respect each other's views. But at the end of the day, when the tariffs come, it's going to affect Albertans. It's going to affect people from BC and Saskatchewan and Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, all the way down the road. No one's exempt from that. And all I believe in, if it comes to that, let's have the tools in our toolbox to react, to send a strong message. But it's not going to be all of a sudden one province or one territory is exempt on this. When Donald Trump comes at us, he's not going to say, well, let's not worry about Ontario, they're good people, or Alberta. He's coming full tilt at Canadians as a whole. And that's one thing we have to understand. We need to be united.
We need to have a group of people who understand the ask being put forward by Donald Trump. Stop the drugs, stop the illegals. There's a whole bunch of them coming over, and I don't want that. And I don't like the big trade deficit that I'm giving $200 billion a year to Canada. I don't like that. If Canada can't stand on its own, then we have leverage. If we need that money, then we don't. Right? And it sounds like we need that money. He's saying, Alberta shouldn't bear the brunt of it. Ontario shouldn't bear the brunt of it. Everybody should bear the brunt of it. And I'm saying you should damn well listen to what Donald Trump is saying instead of pretending that this is China's fault, instead of pretending this is something else, right? It's very frustrating. He's saying, I want to talk about X. And Doug Ford's saying, ABC is really important. Shut up, Doug. Listen, for crying out loud. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. Alex is responding to all this. She says, Alberta may be more inclined to sign on if Team Canada stops standing in its way of getting its energy to market, allow it to diversify trade. If we want to send a message to Trump, Quebec should allow Energy East immediately, lift their oil ban, give and take. Or is it just take for them? Yeah, and I think that's true. And Mark says, I remember in 2018 when Premier Legault said there was no social acceptability for a pipeline from Alberta running through Quebec. Trudeau never challenged him. Where was Team Canada then? Yeah, Team Canada doesn't exist. Team Canada is a manipulation to get you on board with Team China running opposition against Trump when really they should be closing the damn border and stopping the drugs. Like, it's very simple. Gov.exe says at the First Minister's meeting, Trudeau says we need to stand up for Canada's interests and sovereignty while being compromised by the WEF and asking the Governor General to prorogue a parliament for his own benefit. Trudeau has always been Canada last. Yeah, right? It's rich coming from this guy. He is not representing Canada first, not even a little bit, not even close. And so they're making this case, but it's a failed case, I think. I don't believe them. And if I did believe them, I would poke holes in their story and say, you seriously want me to get behind this government that I hate? Are you kidding? And that obviously hates me and wants me silenced and probably, and to hand over my house to some foreigners who just got here? No, get lost. Like, honestly, the last 5-6 years have very clearly sent that message to Canadians. And now they're like, oh, Team Canada, get bent. Holy smoke, get bent. Terry is responding to Mel Joly. Mel Joly says, when we work together and set aside our differences, we focus on what is most important, defending Canadian interests. I'm now in Washington, D.C. to continue making sure Canada is heard loud and clear. Oh my gosh. Mel Joly's in Washington, D.C. and like, that's supposed to make me feel better? Donald Trump's threats should be debated in the House by all MPs, says Terry, instead of being handled in the shadows by a wildly unpopular minority government that prorogued Parliament to escape a non-confidence vote and election. Sitting in a circle and take pictures all you want. Canadians are no longer buying what you're selling. The jig is up. Yeah, this is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Oh, we're sitting in Washington, D.C. talking about how China is the real problem here, but not the Canadian-China problem, like China itself, not us and China, right? It doesn't help. It's ridiculous. Jagmeet Singh says tariff threats will cost jobs and will drive up prices. So Kevin O'Leary, who only speaks for himself, is negotiating to get rid of the Canadian passport. Poilievre and the Conservatives refuse to act because they'll give billionaires like Trump and Musk what they want. Premiers are contradicting each other. Unions and industry are on their own. I've written to the Prime Minister, we need a coordinated, united fight back, and not a sloppy everyone for themselves patchwork. So this is Jagmeet Singh's letter, and I will read it as well. It says, Dear Prime Minister, I'm writing with regard to the extraordinary situation with which Canada will be confronted in short order. We've already been confronted with it. It was just before Christmas that we were told this whole thing, or just right around Christmas, that we were told that we were going to have a 25% tariff, and our government did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And now they're panicking with letters and saying, oh no, we're going to be confronted with this right now. Oh gosh, look, what are we going to do? Incompetence. Complete and utter incompetence. Absolute disastrous. They're playing the game. They've pulled their goalie, and they've got to get 9 goals, and there's 10 seconds left. The other team just scored because they pulled their defense too. Okay. Canadians from all walks of life are deeply troubled by the incoming U.S. President Donald Trump's threat to enact tariffs on Canadian products immediately upon assuming office. These tariffs would increase prices and cost jobs on both sides of the border. Canadians are already struggling with the high cost of living. We cannot afford to sit back and watch events unfold. Canadians expect the government to take a proactive approach that brings Canada together to fight this assault in a coordinated way. The language here is very inflammatory. He's not doing any work to calm things down. He's not doing any work to be conciliatory. He's not doing any work to bridge any misunderstandings or anything like that. He is doing everything he can to inflame things. Okay. In recent days, back to the letter. In recent days, we've seen premiers send contradictory messages to the incoming administration about possible actions to be taken in response to tariffs, and we have seen businessman Kevin O'Leary, who does not speak for Canada or for Canadian businesses, attempt to negotiate directly with President-elect Trump on matters including Canadian passports. In the absence of a coordinated approach, these one-offs will continue, and they could have a lasting impact on our ability to respond to U.S. threats. We cannot continue with an everybody for themselves approach. I understand that you have convened an in-person meeting with Canada's premiers. This is a positive step. It's within that spirit that I'm formally requesting that this table be expanded on an ongoing basis. Canada's premiers, the leaders of all federal parties represented in Parliament, Indigenous organizations, labor unions, and industrial and business leaders need to be brought together immediately to chart a united response to Donald Trump's tariffs. Failure. Absolute failure. Steve Jobs got rid of the committees to design things, and they came up with the iPod and then the iPhone, right? And then when you have a big committee, you can't get anything done. You can't make anybody happy. Like somebody's like, oh, it has to have this. And then like negotiating even to just figure out what you're doing is a nightmare. And this guy wants everybody and their dog involved. Like, oh yeah, don't forget the pets. Even the pets, especially the pets. Next month, a joint mission of Canada's premiers will visit Washington, D.C. to meet with members of the new American administration and Canadian businesses and labor leaders engaged on a daily basis with their U.S. counterparts on matters of mutual interest and concern. Bringing all these voices together to one common table will better coordinate these efforts, and it will help forge the all-hands-on-deck approach that this moment demands. Shouldn't you reconvene Parliament and stop the prorogue? No, we'll just have another table. It'll be another table and it'll be another thing. We'll call it something else. And we'll figure out the governance there because there's a prorogue on, don't you know? It's unfortunate that within this context you have chosen to prorogue Parliament. All parties standing united against Donald Trump in the House of Commons could have sent a powerful signal against his belligerence. And House of Commons committees could have been an avenue to forge a concerted approach. Nonetheless, I do believe that there's an opportunity in the days ahead to bring people together and to begin this vital work in the face of these extraordinary circumstances. I've been heartened to see Canada from all walks of life standing up for Canada, expressing a view that our shared values, our institutions, and our independence will not be compromised. The groundswell of unity and support needs to be reflected at the highest level. There's no support. Our institutions are completely corrupted. Our government is corrupted and compromised by WEF stooges like Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, and CCP stooges as well. At least 11 of them, maybe up to 41 of them. Are you kidding me? Holy smoke. Completely delusional Jagmeet Singh, right? Blaze says, judging by the attacks on Premier Smith by Eastern pundits and politicians, I'd say Canada is in the midst of a full-blown unity crisis. Yep, I would think so. I would say so as well. Here's Jagmeet Singh again. This is at 1:30 p.m. Poilievre is a billionaire bootlicker. He says he refuses to act on Trump's tariffs threat and will hurt Canadian workers. Why? He'll never stand up to billionaires, including Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It's just a fantasy. They're responding to a fantasy. Here's the Western Standard. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful